found I had a issue with my stream last night where I accidentally blanked out everything that I was doing, so you couldn't see anything. So I did a bunch of stuff, but you didn't get to see me do any of it. So let me go back into my save game system here. What I'm doing, I've created a set of loops to save all of the data related to actor variables and NPCs and whatnot. So it's kind of a little different than what it was last night. I've added another section here that will check to see if the map has been loaded. And so it only checks maps that the player has loaded or has encountered that are active and all that, and adds it to a collection of loaded maps. This way, so when the player restarts, it can preload all the maps that were open and running. This has nothing to do with saving stuff on those maps, but it allows you to load all the maps. So all what this does is just adds the name, the map ID, to a collection and creates a list of all the maps that are currently loaded for the player. And then when you come back into the system trigger, the loaded game trigger, it will, I've created a collection loop here, and all this is going to do is go through that collection that I just made, the loaded maps collection, and preload each of those maps. So it's going to use the variable map ID here and just preload each map as it goes through the loop. And so that'll only preload the maps that the player needs to load up once it starts the game, or once they start the game. And then in the orbit map, which is the one that you see whenever you're rotating around a planet and whatnot, I added that. The second part, this was a little bit more complex when I started it. I don't have my text file to do. Oh no, I'm gonna have to go and grab it. I don't think it was this one. It was my save scripts. Okay, yeah. Nope, not my save scripts. Oh no, I don't remember which file I saved it in. Save tables, I think. Look at all these unorganized graphics everywhere. There it is. Okay, yep, that's what I was looking for. Okay, so I broke everything down so I could use a table whenever I'm saving anything related to actors and anything related to space objects, which are also actors. But this one is checking for ships, and the only reason is because they're each different. Ships don't currently have actor variables to save yet. So column 1 of my table, let me give you an example of a table since I haven't actually done that yet. So I created an empty one. Let's just say I'm going to make a fake one called temp. And if you haven't ever messed with tables, you can give it a size. An X size is how wide it is by columns. The Y size is how tall it is by rows. And Z size is technically how deep it is. I call them pages, so it's kind of like stacked pages on top of each other. Z layer 1's the layer on top, Z layer 2 is just underneath, and so forth all the way down. And so if I create a table with 5 by 5 by 5, I get what looks like a little Excel spreadsheet. Do have my mic on, don't I? Pretty sure. Yeah, okay. So it looks like a little Excel spreadsheet, and you can actually import those from Excel using CSVs or text files. And each element in the cell can be accessed individually. Each row can be determined. There's a whole bunch of things you can do with tables. So by default, they're going to be just empty zeros. And you'll see this slider here actually flip through each of the Z pages, Z layers. So this is layer 1, and you can see that it changes as you scroll through. Let's say this one's layer 2. layer 3, layer 4, etc. And so it just lets you store piles of data in a 3D array, I believe it's called. And I use this a lot for things like storing the cells or the tiles on a map in these table cells, or storing lots of data for save game stuff. So the reason I'm using a blank one is because I actually have no idea how big I need it to be, because it's going to be based on how many actors get scanned in the process of the save game event, and so it'll resize dynamically. And the only thing is you have to initially create a table in 001. There's no creating a table on the fly or at runtime, I believe. So with that in mind, I've got an empty table, and originally I had it set up so that the first column was just the map ID, the second column was the object ID, third column's rotation coordinates, and so forth. 1 second. I might have to cut short. Don't know yet. Well, maybe not. Well, what I wanted to do is make it a little bit less confusing, so there's less columns to keep track of. And this might seem a little confusing at first, but what I've got is the full scripting ID here. I'll come into my save game event, and inside this map loop, what the map loop is doing is it goes through each map in the game. It's going to skip over the 2 that have no actors on it. And then inside each of these loops, which I have set up a specific way, it's going to have the current map ID here, the current variable for the actor ID, and I only want to check actors, which is currently just the NPC ships and player ship and stuff, but I'm only storing NPC ships at the moment. And this is kind of just a refresher on the last video, but the first event here is, this is how I fix the issue of having an empty row at the end. I just add a new row at the beginning. That way it doesn't create a brand new blank row at the end. But in the save data table that I want to use, I don't want to clear it out because I do that at the very beginning of the script. Excuse me. Goodness, I'm always coughing and stuff. Let me get a drink. Okay, so I know that I want it to be 4 columns wide for now, because I only have 4 pieces of information I want to store. I want to store the full scripting ID, I want to store the rotation, I want to store its position, and then I want to store any of the important variables that are related to scanning and whether you can scan or dock and whatnot. And then for the Y size, I want it to be resized to the current size of the table. So it's checking the save table that I'm using right now, and 2 is for the Y dimension. If you change this to a 1, it'll check how wide it is. I want to check the Y size, so how tall is it, and it's currently going to be 0 because there's nothing in the collection, or nothing in the table as you saw earlier. So that'll basically start out at 0 plus 1, which will give me row 1. This is the first row. This will create row 1. It's a little confusing at first, but it'll slowly start to make more and more sense over time. The second part here This is to save the first column of information, and that's going to be the map ID / the object ID. And to get both of those in one, while running the loop, it's actually going to pull the full actor scripting ID. But what you want, if you ever want the full scripting ID, you need to do, actor this dot full name, and that will give you a long ID like this. It actually looks like this with a line in front of it. And so this is basically also accessible, a 2-element collection here. This first element of the collection, if you were to split it in half using a colon as a delimiter, space is the first element and the actor ID is the second element. So that's something I'll get into here in a minute. So what that first element is doing is storing the actor ID, so it's actually going to store the full scripting ID at the current axis, and the current axis is the size of the table. So right now it's going to be 1 row, and for every iteration of the loop it's going to increase the size by 1 and add another row. So all I have to do is to add something to the end is to add it using the size of the table. So it'll just take, if there's 3 rows, it'll say the table is at size 3, and it'll add this to row 3. Then I want to get the direction angle. That's my, I think it's Y rotation. Z rotation, I mean. I can never remember. Z or Y. I think it's Z rotation. But I want to store the rotation direction angle in column number 2, or X2, as shown here. X2 will be the rotation. And then here's where it gets slightly weird. To store the coordinates, or the position here, in X3, that's going to be column 3. I actually want to take the X and the Y coordinates, and I just want to combine them with a semicolon. So using the ampersands, I can combine it with this semicolon here, and that will give me a coordinate in this format. If the actor's at X1024 and Y450, I've got this little collection that holds the coordinates value. And then that's all I need right now for ships. For space objects, the ship, or the position of the object, I haven't changed any of my commenting yet, so it's a little bit confusing. But it's storing the X and Y position as a little collection that's split in half with a semicolon. Then there's the actor variables. This one looks much worse than it is. It's not really crazy. All I'm doing is the same thing, but for each of the actor variables that I have, I'm just adding a semicolon in between. That way I get this big long string of 1s and 0s. So my cell will look kind of like this. 1 0 1 0 0 0 and so forth. Each object will have a different set of states for scanning and mining. And so I can actually retrieve each element from this line by splitting that into pieces using these semicolons. So that's how I'm going to store all of my actor variables inside one cell. Now that's not necessarily the most convenient for everybody, so you can easily ignore all of this extra crap and just store a single variable, a single value in a cell. And so the way to retrieve that or load all this would be, let's go back over here to the, I talked a little bit about loaded triggers last night, but inside each of the actors there's a loaded trigger, and this only fires whenever the actor's loading into a map or loading from a save game. And in this case, what I'm doing is checking to see if there has been a save game table made, and that only happens if there is a save game that has been loaded. because the table's only created the first time you make a save game, so anytime you load, it will have the table to check. So this will take the left path here, and the strategy for loading and reloading the actor variables here is to find this actor. This script is inside, let's say it's inside a planet or a star, or if you're using this in your game, some kind of NPC. There's a function called table.find, and I'll create a little log message over here to just use it and give the example. But you want to find something in a table axis. The only table I have is the save data. And here you can mouse over things to get a little tooltip, and this is what will remind you which axis is which number. So 1 would be looking along the x-axis, so it'll start searching cell to cell from left to right. 2 will look along the y-axis, and it'll start searching row to row, starting from top to bottom. And so I wanted to search the y-axis because if you look at the table that I've made, the very first column is going to be the scripting ID of this actor. So I want to search along the y-axis for not just the actor's scripting ID, but the actor full, forgot the period, the full scripting ID, because it's actually both. Now, I want to find in the table, because what this is going to do is it's going to return the number for the row that it's found this in, and each row contains all the information related to this one actor. So I want starting x and y to be 1, 1, 1. So it starts at the very top left and just works its way down, and as soon as it finds it, it'll actually store that number in table axis. I've made a little local variable here called table axis, and once it finds it in the table, it will return the row that this object is in. Now there's another step that I'm going to have to put in here eventually to check whether or not it actually finds anything at all. Right now I know what I'm checking for. I'm just trying to restore actor variables. I'll add all that other stuff later. So first, find the table axis. Do it in a variable. Otherwise, if you do it in every single actor variable, I don't think it has much effect on performance, but just do it once and get the number instead of doing it for every actor variable. So for each of these, I want, and this is going to be confusing at first because I'm using I've actually stored all my actor variable values as this little collection using semicolons. So for each actor variable that I want to retrieve, I had to set up another row here. So the first one is the scan state, whether a planet has been scanned or not. Then whether it can be scanned, whether you can dock with it, whether you can hail it, and whether you can mine it. And each of these values here just gets stuck into this one table cell. And so I want to do a collection split, or a collection item, nth element in collection. And I'll actually recreate what I've got here. Since I've combined all these into one value, I need to find the first element, and I want to split into collection using the delimiter, semicolon, since I've used semicolons. I want to split the element in table. Element in table here is how you directly pick a cell in a table. So I want to pick the one in the table that is at column 1 or x1, because I want it to check the first row, and instead of 1 for the y here, I want to use the table axis. So it's going to find what row this is in, or what row the cell is going to be in, and I believe I want it to be column 4. Yeah, I wanted to check column 4 because that's where I've stored all the active variables. I didn't mean to say 1. Check column 4, split that into a collection, and return the very first element. And so that'll give me this long little string here. But to simplify it, you see I have element 1, element 2, element 3, element 4, and element 5. Really, all I'd have to do is copy paste that into each and change the very last number. So each of these will retrieve the... Oops. Why? Come back. Now, each of these will retrieve the next element in this row here. So this line with the 1 at the end will retrieve the first element, this will retrieve the second, and so forth. So for each of the active variables I have, I've just changed that number at the end. So the object scanned, whether it's been scanned, that's the first element, so I'm using element number 1. Second variable is the can_scan variable, so that's value number 2. Value number 3 is can_dock, can_hail for 4, and can_mine for 5, so forth. You don't have to do it like that either. You can actually just directly reference the cell. So instead of doing all that collection split stuff, if you're just trying to find, you have one single value stored, like, let's say value 0. This is just what's stored in column 4. You might want to do something like set this actor variable object scan to element in table and just manually select it. So you'll find the row that it's in with the table axis value or variable from earlier. And since we just want to find column 4, it will find the row and the cell that is down by whatever your table axis is. Let's say table axis is 3, it'll find row 3, and then it'll move over 4 and pull exactly what's in that cell. So you can just set manually each of your actor variables from what you have saved in the table cell. I do like to compress things into small collections, so I don't have to have 50 rows. I can just have all of my important variables in a single collection inside that cell. I find that helpful or somewhat useful. So then it goes through and does the normal stuff that it does when it spawns on the map. Now, the next little thing I'm doing here is I've just added, I think that's all related to the save thing at the moment. Let me make sure. So yeah, that's all there is to saving the actor variables. Store all the actor variables into cells in a table and then reloading them with a loaded trigger. I think that's all I talked about related to that. So now I'm trying to actually set it up so I have some variable positioning of these main menu screens. So you'll notice some things are slightly different. If I disconnect this, you'll see what I mean. Now, so you'll see how right now this is centered to the entire screen. That's not centered to my camera field. And so I just got to set up some conditions for panning the interface using a pan interface event. And I've done some calculations already and figured out how much I need to offset it, but I want to position it to the 0 origin of the full screen camera minus 96, and I think I don't even have to do it like that. I can just say, I think I can actually subtract 96 from the interface's position, but for now I'm going to go with the camera position, because if I ever move the side, it will at least offset to where the side and top of the camera are. So with this connected, when I open that menu, it'll actually scoot the interface over into place so it's more centered with the camera. So now you see it's right in the middle of my camera field. So this one is not, because I haven't fixed it yet. So I'll come back into the save load game. And I can actually just paste that in here, but that's not the one. I copy pasted the wrong thing. Let's come back over to main menu. Grab a copy of this. Come back over here. And we'll paste that in here. I don't need it at the top, I guess. Put it at the very end. This will position it to the same spot. What I could do is have this position it to the other main menu field, but I can't do that because, as you'll see here in a second, it will look right for a second, but then when I go back to the title screen, it will not. Alright, so while in the game here, it's almost aligned. I think, don't remember what I have to fix there, what I did wrong. I think I repositioned things weird. Let me make sure really quickly these are in the same position. I think it's 640 by 356. 640 by 356. Scoot this guy down. There we go. Okay, they should be in line now. Okay, now they're in line. They load up on top of each other. Now let's go back to the title screen. Now, when I'm on the title screen, it's way over here instead of in the middle of my screen here, which is not what I want. So there's a small condition I want to add to this interface because you won't be able to open the main menu from the title screen yet. I haven't set that up. So what I want to do is create a condition. I use condition branches the most. You don't have to, but you can. I prefer them because it just returns a 1 or a 0 for whatever expression you put inside it, and that's really good for making like little temporary checks instead of using multi-comparison branches and being stuck using just the operators that a multi-comparison branch or a comparison branch has. Let's grab the interface. Where is it? On. Turned on, use value. And the first thing I want to check is if the title screen is on. So if it is, then don't do this. But if it is, I need it centered, so position it at 0. And that should leave it right in the middle of the map, or in the middle of the screen. So now you see it's right in the center. There's a few things I have to fix related to passing priorities back and forth if you're on the title screen and whatnot, but I'll get to that. So if I create a new game, go into my menu, it's centered with the camera here, it's centered with the camera here. Now if I go back to the title screen, now it's right in the very middle. It's doing something funky because I have something set up a little bit funky. Get rid of this, turn that off. Okay, so the canceled trigger here is also going to need to have some conditions to check whether or not you're on the main menu or the title screen and stuff. So I will probably do that another time, but really quickly, I think I can actually add my 5th save slot here, just because, and I'll call that slot 5 choice. And you change that by increasing each of these numbers. This is slot 3, slot 4. I want this to be slot 4, slot 5. And you can see in each of these, this is slot 0, slot 1. This will be slot 1, slot 2. And what that's actually doing is pulling certain values from a save file to display the name of the save slot. So it'll be in like, it's hard to explain. I'll have to break it down in more detail in another video. But so I've got my slot 5 choice. Actually change that to 5. Change that to 5 and increase these by 1, so it's slot 4, slot 5. And change that to slot 4 because it starts at a 0. Slot 0 is also a slot. So just increase the number by 1 for every slot you add. These are all the correct button behaviors. And then I want to add one more background button here. We'll scooch it back until it's near the rest of them. And one more. Lastly, just got to associate it with the label here. So now I've got 5 save slots. And I'm going to go into my save game name here where you input the name, because when you enter or accept, it's actually going to need a whole nother save slot here. So I want to set this up to say slot 5. And I'm just going to copy this, and you see how these are, this is the key, this is the name for the variable that's being saved. And it's going to save it in slot 4. And we'll increase this one to slot 4. So this was the save slot 4, the 5th one. And why is it doing funky? Are these different? Are they new? I don't have anything set here, and it's okay, whatever. Well, you can actually create a custom file here and, you know, say text.txt. You can give it any extension, really. You can call it ext, you can call it top, you can call it pot, you can call it los, whatever you want. It'll just save a file with all this information in it. That's weird. It's interesting that you can't change that without... I guess there's a new version of that node now. Oh well. So now I've got a 5th save slot. I'll just make sure all that's set up right. So whenever you activate it from loaded, it's going to load slot 5. Or, yeah, slot 4 for slot 5. It starts at 0, so slot 4 is the 5th one. So I'll just test my save slot really quick. You see I've got 5 slots. I'll just load one of these games. Save a new game. Toodles. And it saves game in slot 5. We'll go back to the title screen and we'll continue Toodles. Now I've got a 5th save slot. I can load any of my old saves. Some of them are broken because I've changed a few things related to what was in the game, the tables and adding collections and stuff. Like, if I didn't create it for a specific save, it's not going to be there when you load the game. So it's imperative that I get the save system correct, and I don't have to add more tables and collections. Otherwise, you do have to force like brand new saves or brand new games. You have to start over. So I'll just create new save games on top, new save, on top of my broken ones. I'll just refresh everything, fly around a little bit, create a save game over this broken one, tippy-toe. Now I'll go to the title screen and try and continue from any of these. It'll put me in different positions. It'll load the states, the positions of all of my NPC ships, their rotations, and whether they're attacking me. I don't have it set up to cease fire when the game is loading yet. And even that, I don't think I'm going to have a ceasefire. Oh no, I'm about to die. So, in that case, I'd have to load a new game or load my previous save before I got killed mercilessly by triangles. So, what that also allowed is, as you see, I don't have to scan this planet anymore because it's saved all of my actor variables and reloaded them when I came back into the game. I don't have a pause system set up yet when I go into this menu, so I will get a game over here in just a second. Yep. And some things break because there's no game over condition for when you're inside a menu. So, back to the title screen. Any of my saves work. It loads all of my actor variables into each actor. Say I pull up Athos here. I can see the can scan, can hail, etc. All of those values are there. And the rest of them, things like climate values, I don't believe are ever going to change. Hazard ratings are specific to a planet. I don't believe they're going to ever change, and whether it has clouds or not never changes. Descriptions never change. So there are certain things that I don't have to save because they are just static values. Anything that can change based on player action, like if a station doesn't want you to dock or doesn't give you permission, its can dock value here is going to be a 0, and you will no longer be able to dock there. But if you restart the game, if you don't save the value that's in your actor variables, it will just reload the default value that you have there. So that's a really handy way to save your actor values or actor variables. Use a map loop to go through every map that you want to go through that has actors on it, and then use an actor loop inside that map loop. So it'll go through each map, and for each map it'll go through all the actors on the map. So there's a lot more to manipulating tables than just adding elements to them. So you can actually do everything from filling a table with a specific type of data, and like if I'm going through a loop of another table, I can use this to copy information from one table to another. You can use all of these different events to do different things. You can sort a table by alphabetical or numerical order. So if you have a table full of numbers, you can sort it by numbers. You can sort a dictionary of words. You can sort save games by dates and times and stuff. There's also the table loop and table axis loops. Table loop will just go through the entire table cell by cell, and you can actually store the position of the loop by X, Y, and Z. So you have a variable for each of the X, Y, Z's, or each XYZ position, and as it moves through each cell, looping through the entire table, you can retrieve what's at each position. The table axis loop just goes through one axis of the table, X, Y, or Z. and so on. There's reset and stuff. You can also clear out rows, remove an entire row from the table at a specific axis. So if you wanted to find an item or an object in a table, you find its name and just delete it by deleting the entire row. Some of this might not be super clear. I'll end up probably doing much more examples as I create more stuff for this game, because tables are going to be very important. I actually discovered that I do need tables for surface tiles when you're on the planet surface, so those get restored, and there's a bug, or at least a glitch for players who would like to make lots of money. If you go down to a planet, mine all the resources, leave the planet, save your game, and then reload. Every time you reload, the planet's resources respawn, and that's not what I want. I want you to be able to clear out all the resources on a planet, so you can't go back and just get the same resources over and over. I might have like a timer that respawns everything, but in order to do that, I need to decide on a uniform size for my planet maps. I believe it's going to be 100 tiles by 100 tiles. It might be less, might be closer to 80, but right now I'm sticking with these temporary size of 50, and I'll start by making my tables 50 by 50, just to fill out the basics. And all I want it to do is loop through and store positions for all of the resources on a map, which they're all green right now, but you can see the copper and iron. I have to be able to store where those are in order to save and load the state of all of the maps that the player has visited. So there's a lot to consider when you're making a save system, and especially like positioning things. And when an object is dead, if you reload a save, it will be back on the map unless you set up a loaded trigger to delete dead ships or dead objects off your map. But the way that works, the save system works in such a way that you can modify things, move things around your maps, make changes, and it all still works when you go back into the game and reload. That's how you'll make patches and updates and stuff. So I don't know how much of that I covered in the last video, because I did a whole hour and a half long stream that just got blanked out. So you can see if I load a game now, all of this stuff's going to be in the same position that I just set it to, but all the NPCs and actors and stuff are going to be in different locations. They're going to be wherever the player left off. But that means I can edit the maps and make changes without worrying about breaking my save games.
Out of range.
Get away! Die! Some good shooting, Tex. Now that I've got my interfaces panning to the correct spot, they load up in the center of the camera instead of offset somewhere over here in the middle of the whole screen and all that. So that might be all I'm covering this afternoon. Mostly because I worked all night and I need some rest, and I felt bad that I did a stream that didn't actually get completely, it didn't actually get streamed right, so a bit frustrated about that. So I might, I was actually asked recently about compiling my scripts and stuff together, or releasing anything related to this. I believe I will be doing that soon. I've got some custom scripts and custom use values, and even things like this that I can just generalize and create basic save systems, or some scripts. I want to release a lot of these little use values and math for physics and stuff. I don't know if it's going to be patron exclusive or not. Very likely at the moment it'll just be something for patrons. And I've got at the moment all of the sprites and graphics that I'm making for this as well. So I do hope to release the assets for the game at some point. Most likely it will either happen after the game's complete or if I choose to abandon it. And at that point I do plan to release almost everything that I've made for it in some form. That'll probably include all of these little overlays and graphics and animations and stuff, so you can use them however you want. But for now, it's just going to be for this project while I'm working on it. But in the meantime, screamingbrainstudios.com. I've got some updating to do, but you can come grab all kinds of free stuff, public domain stuff. That means you can use it however you want. You can edit it. You can use it in free projects, commercial projects. You can put it on your own website. You can make your own packs and include this stuff with them if you want. You can make a game kit and include my assets with it. These are all public domain. I want to give back. I want to give to the people. So I've got all kinds of sprites and textures and frames and tile sets and textured graphics from 20 years ago. So a lot of this is just made with abandonware software that you can't get anymore. So I've actually mastered a whole bunch of programs that are, well, I won't say mastered, but I've gotten years of experience with a number of programs, and you can't buy them anymore. So I just want to provide the output that they once provided to game developers. There's also tutorials related to old school graphics, everything from isometric graphics, hexagons, seamless textures. And then if you don't have anything to work with, I've got a list of free tools you can download. There's a whole bunch of texture tools, mapping tools, utilities, terrain tools, texture tools, graphics tools, texture tools. I say texture tools because there's a whole bunch of them. And it's all free. You can sign up and become a patron on my Patreon for $1, and you get a special thanks credit on the main website and all the asset packs. And there's something like 1,000 extra free assets that you get for patrons only. But thank you guys for watching. If there's anything you guys want to see, or if I could clarify some things somewhere, just let me know. I'd be happy to. Otherwise, I will see you guys next time.